A decisive setback for Pakistan at the International Court of Justice in the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. The ICJ has ruled today in favour of India. In the case of the former Navy officer Kulbhushan Jadhav, who had been sentenced to death by a Pakistan military court on charges of espionage and terrorism. The ICJ order says that Pakistan violated the Vienna Convention and must reconsider its sentence to Jadhav while providing India access to Jadhav as per the international norms. Until Pakistan reviews the conviction, of course, Jadhav's execution will remain suspended. Taking a look at everything that has happened so far. Let me just bring in my colleague Meenakshi right now. Meenakshi brought us the story when it did happen. Meenakshi, the truth is that the battle will now begin going forward because as it stands, while Pakistan might be best advised to follow the ICJ, it's not compelled to do so. So, even if there is a review, the decision on his life or death still lies within Pakistan.
Well, indeed, Faye, but the big news here is that Jadhav was looking at a possible execution. His life was, hanging in balance, and that is when this intervention of the ICJ happened. And on account of that intervention, he got a fresh lease at life. And today, of course, with this pronouncement, while experts may argue that Pakistan is some experts may argue that Pakistan is not, bound by this judgment. But remember, this is the International Court of Justice that we are talking about. This comes, at a time when Pakistan's conduct is very much a subject matter of international review, with US President Donald Trump just tweeting a short while back about how acute pressure was exercised to find one Mumbai terror attack mastermind. So these are all intertwined instances, Faye, and of course this order of the ICJ completely takes away all credibility from the arguments that Pakistan has provided, and this resonates very heavily in favor of India. This says that the entire sentencing that has been handed out by the military court is a subject matter of reconsideration and review, and that review has to happen as per the Indian conditions, which is this way, that consular access, lawyers and all such help has to be extended to Jadhav. And that apart, the ICJ today also ruling this way, that although Pakistan claims that he was a spy and people who fall within the category of espionage, according to Pakistan, did not come within the purview of the Vienna Convention, even that argument today stands rejected.
All right, Meenakshi, many thanks for bringing us that story when you did, and also now joining us right now on the show, Pinky Anand, the Additional Solicitor General. Ms. Anand, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time. We have a lot of questions from our audience right now, but first, this is, of course, a moment of congratulations for Mr. Harish Salve and team, for the Government of India, for the Ministry of External Affairs. This has been a long road. It has not come easy. This argument went on for over 2 years. Do you see this as a victory today?
Of course, Faye. I mean, the whole thing is actually mind-blowing, so to say, because we are very satisfied with the way things have gone. Indeed, it is a victory for the country first and foremost, and the sovereignty of the country. You have an Indian national who has been treated in the manner that he has been, aside from being denied, of course, the Vienna Convention and the consular relations, been denied every aspect of due process of law. And the upholding of our pleas by the ICJ speaks in volumes for due process of law, for the country of India, for the various people, as you have said, who've headed this entire situation, including, of course, Mr. Salve, who led the team on to this immense victory. And I think it speaks of a place of India in the course of international conduct.
But, Ms. Anand, also, it was a very interesting order that was being read out, by the court. The fact that it went through every one of Pakistan's arguments against India and rebuffed them one by one, giving its justification for why it believed that India was right to have approached the international court, that India's appeal was in fact admissible in that court, that the Vienna Convention, which necessarily suggested that any foreign national being detained in a foreign country must have access to their own country's consular team. It just went piece by piece to show that Pakistan had not adequately put forward a solid case, and that India's case, in fact, was perhaps stronger as far as our decorum has been from the beginning on this case.
You know, Faye, we have taken the side of law. And I think that is what has sustained us throughout. Because what we have urged, look, it's not a question of what has been dealt with. It had to be dealt with. I mean, the ICJ had to take into account and should have taken into account each and every argument made by both the states, because that is the process of law. But having said that, it's not as if Pakistan could not make out a case or did not, it could not. Let me put it like that.
Yes.
There was no way that Pakistan could have actually sustained, and the greatness of the event is that we were able to sustain it. But imagine arguing on the admissibility of such an application. Even otherwise, Faye, let's take it, the second argument, that spies are not entitled to trials or to consular access. You know, these are basic human rights issues and due process issues. And I think that is what speaks about settling down the world to a fair order. Not only, it's not a new order, it's a fair order.
Yes.
And I think that is why the arguments of India were sustained, and we've handled it very discreetly in its own way, and at the same time with a sustained conviction that we were right, and we could not have one of our own being treated in the manner by kangaroo courts and other courts by denying them due process of law and sustaining a conviction behind everybody's back. Nobody knows what happened in that conviction. Nobody knows what happened in that trial. It was without any access. So when the access is there, everything will become very evident on the face of it.
Ms. Anand, also, if with your permission, I'd like to take up some of the questions that our audience is asking at this point. Smita Raj says, will the family of Kulbhushan Jadhav be allowed to meet him?
Yes.
And Ravi Sharma asks, who was the lawyer representing India? Well, that was Harish Salve, Ravi Sharma. I can answer that question for you. There's another question on, is it safe to assume that Jadhav...
Harish Salve, of course. He's been handling this trial throughout.
Yes. Is it safe to assume that Kulbhushan Jadhav will be home soon?
Sorry, is it safe to? That is a question mark, because ultimately ICJ has not held in favor on that account. The consideration today is the sentence stands suspended, and the sentence and the conviction will be reviewed by the Pakistani court. So in a way it means literally setting aside. You can call it suspension, but it effectively means that that sentence and conviction no longer stands. It is literally by way of a review, if you like, or a fresh trial. But his coming home at this point is something which appears not to have been granted by the court.
Right. And Ms. Anand, what happens now? The court has instructed Pakistan to suspend the death sentence. So Kulbhushan Jadhav will not be executed. But is it also advised or instructed Pakistan to review its entire process? Does this mean a fresh trial? And if that's the case, is India assured of getting a fair trial?
I think we'll have to see how time goes on, but definitely the ICJ's ruling for a fresh review would mean in all senses, because if, for example, Jadhav has been sustained on the basis of a so-called confession which ultimately doesn't appear to have been there, you have to consider all the questions afresh. So a review would mean a review in entirety, particularly if all those parameters that are required to be met in law have not been met.
All right. Ms. Vicky Anand, many thanks for joining us on the Urban Debate and helping us understand where the matter goes from now. Just to give our viewers an understanding, the International Court of Justice, weighed in on certain questions. On whether or not, first of all, Pakistan had insisted that India has no right to appeal to this court, and the Court of Justice said that this India's appeal does in fact come under the jurisdiction of the court. They said that India is right, and India was right to appeal. That India was right about the fact that the Vienna Convention had been violated. India was right about the fact that the human rights of Mr. Jadhav had been violated. And India is right about the fact that entire death sentence that Pakistan awarded to Kulbhushan Jadhav in a martial court, in which he had no access to a lawyer and he had no access to the Indian consulate in Pakistan, was a violation of his rights, and hence that sentence should be suspended, and the entire thing should be reviewed with Mr. Jadhav having access to a lawyer and having access to the consulate. We'll just listen in to the Ministry of External Affairs comment on the same matter right now.
Shri Kulbhushan Jadhav. The court by a vote of 15-1, has upheld India's claim that Pakistan is in egregious violation of the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations 1963 on several counts. We also appreciate the direction by the International Court of Justice that Pakistan should review and reconsider the conviction and sentence given to Shri Jadhav by the Pakistani military court. We note that the court has directed that Pakistan is under an obligation to inform Shri Jadhav without further delay of his rights and to provide Indian consular officers access to him in accordance with the Vienna Convention. We expect Pakistan to implement the directive immediately. This landmark judgment validates India's position on this matter fully. We will continue to work vigorously for Sri Kulbhushan Jadhav's early release and return to India. Thank you.
Well, of course, like we've been told, the longer battle now begins of bringing Kulbhushan Jadhav home and bringing him home safely. That will be a battle of Indian, of the Indian government and the Ministry of External Affairs. It'll be a diplomatic, a legal and a political battle. And for that battle, of course, we stand with the Indian government and all efforts being made to make sure that Kulbhushan Jadhav comes home safely.